Wet, running, juicy, stinky, smelly turds. Yeah, DJ Battery in the track. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy fucking turds. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. When I'm on the toilet, I have wet, running, juicy turds. Diarrhea poop is what I like to do. Cause diarrhea is my very best friend. I like diarrhea every fucking day. Devil make diarrhea in the fucking toilet. Make it smell like cheese. What the fuck it smells? It smells like fucking dead batteries. Wet, runny turds. Wet, juicy, runny turds. Wet, runny turds. Wet, juicy, runny turds. Wet, juicy turds. Wet, runny turds. Wet, juicy, wet, runny, wet, juicy turds. Every time I'm on the toilet making it smell, I'm like, what the fucking hell? What the fuck is that smell? I think I just made a diarrhea in the toilet and it smells like deviled eggs. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds, turds, turds. Wet, running, juicy poop, turd, turd, poop. Wet, running, juicy 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 poop. I got wet, running, juicy poop, poop, poop. Wet, running, juicy poop. Wet, runny, juicy turds is what I do. I think I'm a murderer when people smell my turds. It smells like poop. It's poopity scoop. Cause they scooping out my poop with a plunger. Wet, runny, juicy turds. 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 Oh yeah. Wet, running, juicy poop. Wet, running, juicy caca. Wet, running, juicy poop. Wet, juicy crap. Wet, juicy running shit. Wet, juicy runner fecal matter in my diarrhea and it smells bad. Wet, running, juicy feces is what I like to do. I'd rather eat poo-poo than piles of pee-pee. Because if turds is my thing, I like making poops. Cause it smells so bad. But it's like, hey. Wet, running, juicy turds. 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 Wet, run, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Wet, running, juicy turds. Whoa, I gotta kick the poop on a murder. Wet, running, juicy turds. 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 DJ Battery on the track.